Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 70th episode, and today we'll be discussing that the solar eclipse was just a distraction for what you should really be worried about. So, this is one topic. It's going to segue into two others, I suppose, and we're going to start off with the solar eclipse was yesterday, Monday the 8th, and a lot of people got hyped up about it. Of course, this was, most of North America had some sort of partial eclipse. A good, strip of the country was in the path of totality, and people were saying this ushered in the end times. There was an earthquake that happened in New York recently, the epicenter being one of Trump's properties or something like that. So all this stuff is lining up, and people are saying it's the end of times and the apocalypse is going to happen. Although people love to hype everything up as the apocalypse is going to happen. So if people can find an excuse to say that the world is going to end, they're going to. That's why Y2K became a thing. That's why December 2012 became a thing. That's why the solar eclipse was marketed as being the end times. And I do think that's a bit of a psyop to really get people distracted from what's really going on. So there is two topics, two news stories that I want to get into that I think you should be much more worried about, much more aware of than if than certain astronomical phenomenons that are relatively common. Eclipses happen all the time; they just don't happen in places where a lot of people live all the time. So we're going to go to this first one. This is a story from Substack by Robert W. Malone. The link is below, and EPA threatens locally produced beef is the headline. So, if you know anything about me, I've talked ad nauseum about how broken the American food supply is, and this all started in the 70s with the push for the organic label, basically just the USDA forcing big agriculture to be the only agriculture, and this is just more of the same. And this isn't necessarily the USDA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture doing this. This is the EPA basically proposing a new rule that would bring 3,879 meat and poultry product processing facilities under their jurisdiction. And the justification for this is saying, well, these plants or these facilities are producing too much nitrogen runoff in the water, and they need this $100,000 or let's say it's a $300,000 to $400,000 initial cost to install the water filtration system, and then you got to spend $100,000 a year in annual maintenance. This would close many small meat producers, ones that do the meat processing for smaller farms, like the Miller's Bio Farm. I have the link in the description. They don't, send their chicken to Tyson. They don't send their beef to the big, producers, the big packing plants, whatever that is specific, whatever those are specifically called for beef. But you've got, these big companies like Tyson and all this factory farming that goes on, they cause more pollution, if not the same amount as the EPA is claiming that these smaller ones are doing. But the thing is that these big companies, like you got like a Tyson, these multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations, the EPA will say, hey, there's too much nitrogen runoff, or your water filtration system is not off point, or there's too much methane coming from your cow's buttholes, so you're going to have to pay more for that, and they'll just pay the fine and they can eat the costs. But the smaller producers, the ones that are just doing low volume runs for smaller farms that raise their animals on regenerative real pastures, they're the ones who are going to get closed up by the EPA saying, well, you have to install this $300,000 filtration system, and they can barely keep the lights on as it is with all the costs to do everything. And this is something that you really ought to be aware of, is that the U.S. government is on a absolute crusade to make it as hard as possible to have a small business. Really, it's just any sort of way to decentralize. They want decentralization. I mean, that's why the federal government became a thing after the Articles of Confederation were passed, because they couldn't centralize enough, so they wanted to centralize more. And then once that can of worms got open, we got to where we are at today, unfortunately, where you can't even have your own local meat producer make anything, because the EPA is going to come in and say there's too much water runoff. You have to install a water filtration system that you can't afford. And then when they get that, they get shuttered. That's a meat processing plant that's done, and you have to buy the factory farm meat from Tyson or wherever it is, or you're getting it shipped imported, because a lot of beef in this country is imported. It doesn't come locally. So there's always that to think of, right? So it's just the awareness that you need to have that the EPA, the USDA, they want you to be eating this plastic made slop. They don't want you eating real food. They don't want you buying from local farms. They want you buying from the middle aisles in the grocery store, the ones, all the packaged stuff that you just throw into your microwave, and then you just eat, or, better yet, you just DoorDash every meal. That's what they want. And this is more evidence in my mind that they are pushing this onto the population by going after the small farmers, by going after the small meat processing plants and getting them shut down, by regulating them out of existence, basically, by saying you have to follow these regulations that require you to incur these expenses that you can't afford. $300,000 to install a system, $100,000 a year to maintain it. You're not operating at those sort of profit margins for, if you're only doing small volume meat processing, which is what you're going to be doing if your clients are exclusively pasture raised animals on actual pastures, not just like the marketing term pasture, but like their actual pastures where they actually have enough space to graze, and it's regenerative, and it's actually good for the environment, it's good for the animal, and then it's good for the people who consume those animal products, right? Because a lot of animals that are factory farmed, they're very unhealthy animals, which means the animal products they produce are unhealthy, which degrades the health of the common person, which is yet another reason why we're such a sickly country. But that's a whole other thing to get into. But we're going to get into the next article. This is a doozy. From Scientific American, headline reads: Geoengineering test quietly launches salt crystals into the atmosphere. And this is from April 4th, 2024. Around the time that the eclipse was being hyped up, this sort of just goes out there. They were very hush-hush about this. They didn't want people knowing about what they were doing. So basically, this experiment was kept under wraps until the test started. We're eager to see how public engagement is being planned and who will be involved. The executive director of Alliance for Just Deliberation on Solar Geoengineering, a nonprofit that seeks to include developing countries in decisions about solar modification, also known as I don't know why I'm reading that part, but basically, to give the bird's eye view of this, they have a decommissioned aircraft carrier, sent it out into the ocean, and they have these special, nozzles spray out salt particles into the marine atmosphere to make the clouds more dense, and that will block out more of the sun, and it'll make things cooler. And that's the idea of this. Of course, putting aerosols into our atmosphere artificially, that makes you think of chemtrails, but of course that's just a crazy conspiracy theory. But of course, if something like this coming out, it makes it very hard for me to not think that chemtrails aren't a thing, especially when you see those trails in the sky and you think, well, it's probably just planes flying. But when you hear this and you see the fact that they wanted to keep it under wraps, they release this at the perfect time, and going back to what the EPA is doing with meat processing plants, they had a very short public period, and that was March 25th. That was a little bit before the eclipse, but I think that was still starting to get into the news cycle. But again, this is stuff that's happening, it's explicitly happening, and the eclipse is what got more play rather than the fact that they are trying to destroy local farming, and they're also trying to basically play God with the climate, spraying salt particles into the air over the ocean and thinking that's going to do anything. And again, the fact that these are custom made, the fact that they could, they're going to spray trillions of sea salt particles in the sky. It just makes it very easy to sneak other things. It makes it easier for these things, even if they are, even if they have the best of intentions, right? Of the fact that there could be all these problems with this technology, and it could have, severe, glitches or things that go wrong, and that could cause problems as well that are detrimental to the health of the ocean and therefore the health of the planet, or a lot of this stuff being intentional, like they're putting in more microplastics or putting in like atrazine or any all these other endocrine disruptors that exist to really fuck with the environment even more, just to see what's going to happen. It just makes you think. And of course, the fact that they were so hush-hush about this, and the fact that they knew that people were going to be up against this, and the fact that they're building technology specifically for this purpose, right? These spray nozzles or built specifically for this. They use the decommissioned aircraft carrier. They're very specifically planning this to be doing this consistently in the future. It does not make one think that chemtrails aren't a thing. It doesn't make one think that the U.S. government isn't fucking with the climate intentionally to make things worse so they can run off with more of the wealth for themselves. But that's me putting my tinfoil hat on. Again, you can think of whatever you want about these things, right? You can think I'm completely wrong. You can think I'm insane, but at least you know, right? And this is the whole thing. So whenever you see a big story getting a lot of play in the news that seems to be, something like the Eclipse, you want to think, what isn't in the news cycle that really ought to be? But that's all I've got. Hopefully you enjoyed this one, and Joker is out. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Joker the Fool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.